Captain Zorneth stalked the halls of the command ship, his upper limbs shaking in barely contained rage. The first contact mission with the newly discovered planet Terra had gone horribly wrong. The primitive bipeds that called themselves humans had responded to peaceful overtures by immediately opening fire on the exploration fleet. Many good soldiers had been lost before the fleet could retreat out of range. The Council would demand an explanation for the unprovoked attack. In the aftermath, all Zorneth felt was fury and shame. An advanced Vrexian exploration fleet outfought by creatures wielding chemical slug throwers. The humans' projectile weapons had wreaked havoc, their kinetic force tearing through even the strongest armor. Zorneth clenched his mandibles in frustration. He should have been more cautious with an unknown species, but the scans indicated Terra was far behind Vrex scientifically. There had seemed no need for excessive weapons or defenses. A mistake that had cost lives. "Commander Zentha, report to the bridge immediately," Zorneth growled into the comms. His second-in-command would help him make sense of this debacle. There must be something they had missed in their assessment of the human forces. Some reason these backwater primitives had weapons to challenge a spacefaring race. Zentha arrived swiftly, his own limbs twitching in agitation. "What are your orders, Captain? Shall I prepare a counterattack against the human settlement from which we were fired upon?" Zorneth waved a clawed hand. "Not yet. We must learn more first. Increase surveillance from high orbit. I want to know how the humans managed to acquire such weaponry. Scan for energy sources, industrial complexes, anything to explain their advanced firearms." The bridge crew worked furiously to gather and analyze data. Images and readings flooded in from the fleet's sensors. Zorneth studied them, seeking clues, and found more mysteries instead. The planet seemed almost pre-industrial, its cities small and primitive. Yet those same cities held stores of devastating kinetic weapons and explosives. "This makes no sense," Zentha burst out. "Where are they manufacturing such arms?" Zorneth shook his head. "There must be hidden complexes we cannot yet detect. They may have tunneled underground to conceal their capabilities." A cold anger crept into his voice. "We have underestimated this species. To them, we are not fellow sapiens to contact, we are merely the next threat to destroy." "Barbarians," Zentha said bitterly. "We shall teach them otherwise." Zorneth straightened, his resolve hardening. "Ready the ground invasion forces. We will take and occupy the human population centers to open communications. Once they realize we are not enemies, negotiations can begin." The fleet transported strike teams into the largest human cities, armed and armored Vrexians prepared to crush any resistance. Zorneth watched the feed from Commander Zentha's helmet cam as they marched out to secure a central structure flying the human sigil of governance. He allowed himself a smile, mandibles flexing in satisfaction. Soon they would have the leader of this settlement under control. Without warning, kinetic fire erupted from all around them. The distinctive crack of chemical propellant projectiles filled the air. Zentha's soldiers returned fire immediately, but the unseen enemy seemed to be everywhere at once. Zorneth watched in growing horror as yet another ambush unfolded. The primitives had lured them deeper into the city, then attacked from concealed positions with coordinated fields of fire. Zentha and his troops held their own for a time, but their numbers steadily dwindled under the human assault. "Pull your units back to the landing coordinates," Zorneth shouted over comms. There was no response, only screams and weapon fire. When the video feed went dark, he knew they were gone. Switching channels brought him similar scenes of chaos repeated across the planet. The confident strike teams were shattered, their most advanced armor and weapons meaningless against an enemy they couldn't see. It was a massacre. Zorneth stared down at Terra, awash in rage and humiliation. The humans refused all attempts at communication. Settlement after settlement fell to the same ambush tactics. Vrexian casualties mounted while the enemy remained hidden and untouchable. These were not mindless beasts reacting on instinct. The humans were strategists, and they were winning. In a final desperate ploy, Zorneth withdrew the fleet from orbit to analyze the results of their failed campaign. "The humans have clearly done this before," he told his staff. "Study their history again for clues to their battle methodology." The answers uncovered were profoundly disturbing. Terra's history was filled with conflict, its nations constantly at war over resources and ideology. Weapons development had become central to every human culture, with many settlements devoted solely to designing new and deadlier armaments. They did not see violence as an absolute last resort. It was their first response to any new threat. They enjoyed warfare. How can we fight such an enemy? Zentha asked hopelessly. A species evolved and conditioned for war. Zornith set his mandibles. By learning from them. They wish to make this a battle of stealth and shadows. Then we shall adapt their own methods. A dangerous ambition was hardening within him. The council would call it madness, but the council was not here facing oblivion. Zornith would become as ruthless as these humans if that was what it took to survive. On his honor, the Vrexian fleet would not be defeated by mere savages, no matter the cost. From that point on, the war changed. Advanced strike teams were replaced with infiltrator cells, trained in covert entry and warfare. They slipped into human cities on midnight landings, disguising themselves with stolen enemy uniforms. Zornith watched on scanners as they placed explosives with strategic precision before fading back into the darkness. When the bombs ripped through industrial districts and arms stockpiles, chaos erupted across Terra Raw. The cells targeted fuel production, food storage, medical facilities, anything critical to human civilization. Strict orders were given to avoid civilian deaths, honoring sacred Vrexian rules of engagement. Zornith's conscience would allow nothing else, even knowing the enemy would not extend the same restraint. Finally, the humans seemed to realize their cities were no longer safe. Fear and paranoia began corroding their leadership. With no idea how Vrexians were penetrating their strongholds, they had no effective counter. From space, Zornith observed his handiwork, the smoking aftermath of infrastructure smashed beyond repair, civilians fleeing their homes in panic. Perhaps now these humans would understand that the Vrexians could be just as merciless as themselves. "We will burn their civilization to ash if we must," he declared. "They will learn there is a terrible price for defying the Council's will." Zentha clicked his mandibles nervously at the captain's side. And if that is not enough, what if they refuse to yield, even in ruins? The humans fight on when any sane species would recognize defeat. How do we compel them to surrender? Zornith turned dark, brooding eyes on his second. "By becoming what they made us, Zentha, we shall match their heartlessness until the concept of further resistance becomes unthinkable." He ignored Zentha's visible shudder, refusing to dwell on his own gnawing doubts. They had come too far. The only options left were victory or death. A movement on long-range sensors interrupted his dark thoughts. Zornith studied the readings with growing excitement. A convoy heavily armored. Escorting critical cargo, he turned urgently to his weapons officers. "Target their propulsion and weapons systems only. Disable but do not destroy. This ship must be captured intact." The stealth units crept closer, breaching the convoy's security measures with ease. On Zornith's signal, precision fire took out engines and guns. As the human vessel listed helplessly, boarding pods attached to its airlocks to disgorge squads of elite Vrexian commandos. Zornith patched in to the strike leader's video. For long moments they advanced through deserted corridors, the humans' bizarre angular architecture seeming to reject their presence. Then the enemy defenders burst from concealment, kinetic firearms blazing. Zornith clenched a fist as the Vrexian troops laid down suppression fire, refusing to yield. "Adapt and overcome," he reminded himself. "Adapt and overcome." It was over quickly. The commandos towed the battered convoy ship back to the fleet, where Zornith waited impatiently as they cracked open its heavily secured cargo bay. The interior doors finally slid apart, and Zornith staggered back with a hoarse cry. Rows of fusion warheads glowed under the harsh lights, weapons of almost unimaginable destruction. Yet it was the vessel's destination recorded in its nav systems that turned his blood to ice. Vrexia. "They have gone mad," Zentha rasped in horror, "making unprovoked war against the very heart of our civilization." Zornith could not answer, lost in the nightmare reality unfolding before them. The humans had interpreted invasion of their world as justification to threaten the existence of his entire species. Zornith sank to his knees, overcome by despair and self-loathing. In attacking Earth, he had unleashed a force that now endangered everything the Vrexians held dear. These humans would stop at nothing to defeat an enemy, even one who only wished communication. They possessed no concept of mercy or restraint in war, and if Vrexia fell, billions of his people would perish. "What have I done?" he whispered. "In trying to subdue them, we have only fed their endless hunger for war." He thought back to that disastrous first contact, when human aggression had so shocked his crew. But with sudden clarity, Zornith saw his own failure had come first. Approaching a newly discovered people with the superiority and arrogance of Rexian might, was it any wonder the humans felt threatened enough to attack? If only he had proceeded with more care, more respect. This horror might have been prevented. Zornith slowly rose to his feet. We will return those warheads to Earth orbit, ignoring Zentha's stunned expression. He continued, and we shall formally surrender to human authority over their system. He straightened his shoulders, mandibles flexing with new resolve. I see now that what we face is not madness, but a sentient people defending their existence against invaders. I was the mad one for not realizing it sooner. Zornith opened a comm channel to the conquered human ship. You have bested us with your ferocity and cunning. We can wage war as ruthlessly as you, yet it shall destroy us both in the end. He hesitated only a moment. I offer my unconditional surrender, if only to prove that peace can still be found between us. He had no way to know if the humans even received his message, but it did not matter. Turning to Zentha, he said, simply issue the order to withdraw all Rexian forces from Earth space. We shall leave these people be, and pray they do the same for us. There was still hope. Perhaps in time, with care and understanding instead of violence, humanity could come to see the Rexians not as enemies, but as fellow travelers under the same stars. It was all Captain Zornith could do, the only path left that might lead to forgiveness and peace.